Myers Jaffe, and I'm Executive Director for Energy and Sustainability at University of California, Davis, and I'm a Senior Advisor to the University of California's Office of the Chief Investment Officer. I spoke today at GARP 2017 about the risks facing the oil market. So, in the competition of energy space, you have a lot of movement because technologies are changing the cost basis. In coal, honestly, everything's going to automation. So the combination of robotics and self-driving vehicles means that the cost of mining and transporting coal is going down, right? In oil, we have these new technologies to produce oil and gas from shale and other things, and the cost of those technologies is coming down. Natural gas, the cost in the United States, for example, people had projected that to go to $6 per MCF. Now you are seeing natural gas produced in the United States in some location at $1 or less per MCF. So, and renewable costs have collapsed. So the competition space is somewhat affected by regulatory environment, or can be influenced by that. But in the end, technology is a much more big driving factor in the competition among these fuels. And so when governments come in, even here in the United States, and says, we want to help this fuel versus that fuel, and we're going to do something to help those fuels. In the end, technology and cost are going to be the drivers. And where it used to be really true that renewables really needed a subsidy and coal was really the cheapest commodity, that's no longer true anymore. Natural gas is very competitive on a cost basis, but renewables in some locations are probably more cost effective than even natural gas. So, the jury's kind of out now on how much of it is just going to go by businesses making decisions and how much of it's going to be regulatory. And what I would tell you is also, when you put in energy infrastructure, no matter what kind of infrastructure it is, you're talking about 20-year decision, right? You're not going to build a utility scale solar operation with battery storage for 2 years. You're not building a new natural gas power station or a nuclear plant for operating for 2 or 3 years. You're building that infrastructure for 20 years, 30 years, right? So those decisions have nothing to do with the trajectory of a 4-year presidency in the United States or a 6-year presidency in Europe, right? These things are decadal decisions with risk and technology risks assessed by businesses based on their perceptions of markets in a long-term way. And I think the public doesn't really understand that. I think the public feels like somebody can come into a government, whether it's here or in Europe, and push a button. And, it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on or what your philosophy is on low carbon versus non-low carbon. There's this perception that somehow governments can magically completely change the outlook. And, governments can influence the outlook. You can try to incentivize one thing versus another, and policy does make a difference. But in the end, because technology is policy neutral, over time, if technologies come down in cost, what wins as a technology can really change. And that's why, in the end, government policy in terms of research and development can actually be the more critical factor in long-term influence over markets. Now, let's say the United States decides that it doesn't want to invest in energy R&D anymore. It's, too expensive, not productive enough, a lot of money wasted in biofuels. The problem is that China has made a dramatic commitment to the future of their economy running on that innovation. So it's a competition, it's a economic competitiveness issue between the United States and China. If China's going to do advanced energy technology and advanced vehicles as their industrial policy, which they have made clear in their 5-year plans, and the United States does not do that, the question one has to ask as an American is, will our economy be competitive 10 years from now compared to China if they're making a big push in R&D for these new kinds of technologies and we don't. And even if we in the United States decide that self-driving vehicles and robotics and artificial intelligence are technologies that are going to eliminate too many jobs and are not going to produce the social effects that we want here in the United States, I can understand why we would debate that, because that's about, basic human dignity. The problem is you've got other countries like Japan where population demographics is actually population's falling. And the only way for Japan to keep its economy churning is actually going to be to use robots and self-driving vehicles. And so we're not going to stop the technology just because it doesn't make sense in our society. We're really going to have to think carefully about how to integrate these technologies into our society in a way that provides dignified opportunity to work for all Americans.